Call the HRA to order. Roll call.
Tao. Commissioner Tao.
Present.
Yang.
Here.
Renmoen.
Here.
Jalali.
Here.
Naker.
Here.
Prince.
Here.
Chair Tolbert.
Here.
7 present, no one absent. Resolution 20-597, approving the guidelines for the St. Paul Bridge Fund for families and small businesses and allocating $3.3 million of Housing and Redevelopment Authority resources to fund the St. Paul Bridge Fund to provide emergency relief to small businesses and families in response to the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic citywide.
And thank you, everybody. This is, I think, our first virtual HRA meeting, so history. I do want to say maybe we can follow the same thing that it seemed to work well with Council President Brenmoen of the mute buttons. It looks like everybody has their mute button not on, so if you could turn your buttons on and mute. And my thought is just to move efficiently and effectively, we will let Director Guild give a staff report following up on the mayor's report last week to the council on the proposal before us. And then I do know we have a few amendments, and I'm sure we'll have much discussion to have, but maybe we can start with the staff report from Director Guild and go from there. And if you would like to talk, just unmute and I will try and call on you. So, Director Guild, are you on?
I am. Good afternoon, Chair Tolbert and Commissioners. Again, Kristen Guild, the Interim Director, Executive Director of the HRA. Thank you all so much for your engagement this past week and your questions on the Bridge Fund. I'm going to try to cover the themes that we've heard in my remarks here, but we also have our core development team leads lined up here to speak in the Q&A. So we have Economic Development Director Martin Schiekel and Program Lead Andy Hessness. We have Housing Director Kayla Schuckman and Program Lead Kate Rodriguez and Assistant City Attorney Kate Daly here available to speak. So I'd like to start with some acknowledgments here because I don't want it to get buried. The program development work that's been done on the Bridge Fund, I find really remarkable. So not just in a very short period of time, and that's certainly true, but to put it only in that frame, I think is to undervalue the quality of the work that we have here. And the program development work that I've seen the St. Paul team do in the past few weeks on the Bridge Fund program is frankly some of the finest and most thoughtful work that I've seen in my 25-year career in community development. And it's been widely validated by economists and business leaders and community partners. So I want to take the time to acknowledge the city staff team who have been involved. This is definitely a team sport. Our core program development team is amazing. Andy Hessness, Laura Hainson, Ross Currier, Economic Development Director Martin Schiekel on the business program, and Kate Rodriguez, Nick Betcher, and Housing Director Kayla Schuckman on the families program. From the City Attorney's Office, Kate Daly has been with us every step of the way with key assists from Adam Niblick and City Attorney Lindsay Olson. And then from Finance, our City Treasurer, Mike Solomon, and Finance Director, John McCarthy, have been directly involved. And from the Office of Financial Empowerment, Director Munir Karcher-Ramos, Kirsten Birch, and Casey Weidrich have all provided their insights into this work. And from OTC, Solutions Architect Justin Ruiz is building the online application for the program. There are also a number of folks who I'd like to recognize from the business community. So I'd like to acknowledge the insights that have been provided by the Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers, by the Federal Reserve Bank, the Neighborhood Development Center, SPEDCO, the St. Paul Area Chamber, the Center for Economic Inclusion, and then many individual businesses that we've consulted with. So I'll give you a roadmap for my remarks. And this will be a little bit lengthy because there's just a lot that we need to cover here, and I want to be thoughtful about setting the frame before we dive into Q&A. So the roadmap is, I'll start with the program description, go through the 2 changes that have been made since the mayor introduced the program to you all a week ago. I'll acknowledge our funding partners and give a fundraising status update, and provide the rationale for the program criteria that we're recommending here, including the eligibility thresholds and then the grant amounts. Then I'll go through briefly with the program administration approach, the outreach plan, our thoughts on application support, outline the proposed timing that we have in mind, provide an overview of other resources that are available to businesses and also to residents and nonprofits, and then end with the actions that are before you today. So for the program description, before you today is a proposal to invest $3.25 million in emergency relief grants to the small businesses and families in our community who are the most vulnerable and impacted by the COVID pandemic. Our objectives for the Bridge Fund are, 1, to support as many of our most vulnerable residents and small businesses as we can with limited resources. 2, to provide a level of support that will be meaningful to those parties. 3, provide that support with speed and urgency. And 4, to complement rather than duplicate the federal and state resources that are coming online. So for the Families Program, we're recommending a $1 million investment to provide families of a $1,000 grant, which is sized to rent or mortgage payments, but it isn't restricted to those expenses. And eligible families will have income at or below 40% area median income, which right now for a family of 4 is $40,000. They'll have at least 1 minor child present in the household, and they will have experienced a loss of income due to COVID. For businesses, we're proposing a $2.25 million investment to provide $7,500 grants for immediate business expenses. And that would include rent and mortgage payments, employee health benefits, leave payments and payroll payments, and then other accounts payables, including payments that would be due to suppliers. The eligibility criteria for small businesses are 20 or fewer employees, a gross revenue of $2 million or less, that they have been in operation within the city of St. Paul for at least the last 6 months, and that they've either had to close or have had a really significant reduction in revenues due to a governor's order that's related to COVID. There have been two changes that have been made since Mayor Carter introduced the Bridge Fund a week ago. Both of them are to the families grants, and both of these were incorporated into the HRA board report and guidelines for this meeting. So after we heard community feedback about eligibility for students enrolled in both charter and private schools, we're recommending that all families with at least 1 child under 18 will be eligible, whereas the original proposal tied eligibility to enrollment, specifically in the St. Paul public schools. Then change 2, following the passage of the Federal CARES Act last Friday, we're proposing $1,000 grants to families instead of $2,000 as we originally proposed. The CARES Act provides grants of $1,200 per adult and $500 per child for people who are earning up to $75,000, and it's $150 for married couples. And it also expands unemployment insurance payments and eligibility. So we believe that a grant of $1,000 to families better meets the objective of complementing the federal aid, and it'll allow us to support more families in St. Paul. So with the HRA dollars identified with these guidelines, we expect to be able to serve 300 businesses and 1,000 families. Next, I'll turn to a fundraising report. So pleased to note that in just 1 week, business and philanthropic partners have contributed $600,000 to the Bridge Fund. The St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation, in addition to making a cash contribution, has established a donor fund for the program, and they're overseeing it. And they're also providing their expertise. So other donors to the fund to date include the Ecolab Foundation, the Knight Foundation, Minnesota United, the Minnesota Wild, Securian, and Excel Energy. We're also working with the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation to establish a portal for individual giving, and we're collecting names for people who have already stepped forward and expressed an interest in that. So we'll be looping back to that. I'll note that these dollars will be deployed in addition to the city resources. And this means that we'll be able to provide crucial support to more families and small businesses through the Bridge Fund. Next up, I want to cover our rationale for the eligibility recommendations and grant amounts. Our program development teams have worked really hard to balance the 4 objectives to the program that I outlined. So again, that's to support as many vulnerable families and businesses as we can, to provide a level of support that would be meaningful, to provide it with speed, and to complement the federal and state resources. So here's a little bit more about our thinking, starting with families. We know that families that are earning less than 40% area median income are struggling even in good economic times, and that those who have lost a job or income due to COVID are now in crisis. So during a time when home is a necessary ingredient for maintaining health, ensuring housing stability is even more critical, and families with children earning low incomes are already particularly vulnerable to housing instability, and the COVID crisis will just have a magnified impact there. Research shows that housing instability is disruptive to a child's development and educational experience and has lasting negative impacts. So we're expecting that a $1,000 grant will help support a family's ability to cover about 1 month of median housing expenses for both renters and homeowners. And those numbers are $935 a month on average for renters and $1,558 for homeowners. The grant is designed to provide bridge support, hence Bridge Fund, for families to meet their housing needs and other urgent expenses until additional resources are available at the state and federal levels and to complement those other sources. There's been some questions about the estimated universe of families that we think will meet these criteria. And our data guru, Bob Spalding, who I should have noted in my acknowledgments, he's been part of the team sport as well. He did some work on this and identified that about 8,000 St. Paul families have children and are earning 40% area median income or less. So that's the initial cut of the universe, but the universe will be smaller when we layer in families who have specifically experienced job or income loss connected to COVID. Turning to the business side, we are proposing eligibility criteria on the size of businesses in order to target the small businesses that won't have as much access to the federal and state resources as well as to other resources. So for that, we're recommending for the size between 1 and 20 employees, and then also gross revenues of up to $2 million. These recommendations are based on both our in-house expertise in managing STAR and HRA business loans, as well as consultation with a number of small business lenders in our area. And the size is recommended, again, to target the Bridge Fund for the most vulnerable businesses who are less likely to have access to other resources. We do expect that, particularly with the very robust resources in the CARES Act, that larger businesses will have access to more tools to support them during this time, and that includes SBA funding and other bank financing, existing lines of credit, owner equity, and even friends and family lending. We think that the new SBA tools that are part of the CARES Act that was signed into law last Friday are in fact a terrific resource for even slightly larger businesses than we've targeted for the Bridge Fund. And they do now include immediate grants of up to $10,000 and forgivable loans for businesses that keep staff on payroll during this time. So I'll go into a little bit more detail in a bit about the federal and state resources, but wanted to flag that here as well as I outline our thinking. On the size, the range of employees and the dollar of gross revenues is also similar to a few very widely used city definitions of small businesses. And that includes the Earn Sick and Safe Time, which sets the peg at small at 23 FTEs. The Neighborhood Star program uses the state definition of 20 FTEs and 1 million in gross revenues. The Ready for Rail program that several years ago supported businesses along the Green Line during construction, served businesses with gross revenues of up to 2 million. And like the Ready for Rail program, by allowing businesses with up to 2 million in revenues, rather than using the state and star definition of up to 1 million in gross revenues, we're accounting for businesses that have slim margins, like small restaurants that tend to have high revenues, but also high expenses. On the amount of the grant for businesses, the amount is recommended at $7,500 for small businesses. And according to research by JP Morgan Chase, we know that half of all small businesses in the country have only 27 days on cash or less. So this means that extended temporary closures can threaten the ability of the business to avoid permanent closure. And then more concerning, the average restaurant only has 16 days of cash on hand. So we spoke about this, about pegging this amount and other program elements extensively with the Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers. They have a large portfolio of micro business clients, and they shared with us that what they've seen for typical independent micro businesses is that they tend to have a monthly income of somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000 a month, and that the owner is typically taking home a salary of about $2,000 a month. So from their experience, they thought that a grant of $7,500 would make a significant impact on these small business owners' ability to survive a few months without needing to abandon their business just to make ends meet. We're also proposing a flat amount for all businesses because that greatly simplifies the application process for both applicants and staff. And it accelerates the speed to award the grants to eligible businesses. And then also I'll note that a flat amount is a progressive support, with the largest benefit going to the smallest, most vulnerable businesses in percentage terms, and therefore providing the most meaningful support to the most vulnerable. On the estimated universe of eligible businesses, based on 2019 deed data, there were 3,400 total businesses in St. Paul with 20 or fewer employees, and 844 of those were categorized as the types of businesses that were subject to the governor's first closure order. So with the expanded governor's closure orders, there are more businesses impacted, and we estimate that somewhere between 500 and 1,000 businesses meet the totality of the program criteria. We've also gotten some questions about nonprofit eligibility, so I want to address that. While we know that some nonprofit organizations have also been impacted by COVID, the Bridge Fund specifically is targeted to for-profit businesses. Most nonprofits aren't dependent entirely on customer purchases for revenues, and they have a different cycle and sources for revenues as well than small businesses do. Whereas we know that customer-facing small businesses across the city that are closed or are operating on very reduced operations are facing an immediate cash flow crunch, and often, again, just have a few weeks of cash on hand. So we've designated a member of the PED team to aggregate resources that we know are available for nonprofits. The federal programs are all available for nonprofits, and in some cases they have more favorable terms for nonprofits than for businesses. So I'll flag that. But we are also working to aggregate information, and will stand at the ready to provide assistance to nonprofits in applying for other resources as well. So on to some of the logistics pieces. On program administration, this was a decision we knew we needed to make about the program very early on, whether we would administer it through partners, as we often do with these kinds of programs, or directly as the city. And we talked with a number of community partners, and it became pretty quickly clear that for both speed and capacity reasons, we really needed to administer this in-house as the city. I'll give a couple frames of reference on our thinking there. Our partnership agreements for the Family First program took 4 months to negotiate and execute, and the Ready for Rail program for Green Line business support had a really similar time frame for setting up the partner agreements. And those were fast-tracked processes, so we simply do not have anywhere near that kind of time here. And then in terms of capacity on the housing side, our community partners are really engaged in administering the Families First program, and we need them to continue that focused, intensive work supporting St. Paul families through Families First, which is even more challenging now that we have all of our St. Paul public schools and other schools going virtual. Then on the business side, most of the community partners that we turn to are deed emergency loan administrators, and we know that their expertise and effort and staff capacity is needed to support that work for supporting St. Paul small businesses. So we're confident that in partnership with finance and OTC, OFE, and also redeploying some very talented staff from libraries, that we're best positioned as a city to administer these programs in-house. Our outreach plan, and then I'll go into application support. The materials for the program will all be translated into Spanish, Somali, Hmong, Karen, and Oromo. We have a number of strategies for broad media outreach, including TV, radio, print, and including small community papers and non-English media. With social media, we'll be really active. And we'll ask all of you to get the word out broadly through your social media networks as well. And then, of course, we'll be enlisting the St. Paul Public Schools to get word out, our partners in the cultural destination areas, collaborative, business technical assistance providers, the extensive city lists that we have. And we'll be providing a consolidated frequently asked questions document to constituent services staff in the mayor's office, council offices, the DSI call center, the new language resource center line, and all of our community partners in all sectors. And just a report from our PED reception staff and other program staff today. It seems that the word is already getting out about the program, which is good news, just based on the volume of calls that we've gotten and emails inquiring about it. In terms of application support, I want to just highlight our plan for that. The application that we are building with our friend Justin Ruiz in OTC will be online, and it'll be mobile friendly. It'll be designed for an interface with a smartphone or a tablet, and for cellular service. So we have all of that in mind as we're doing the build and design. We will require some amount of documentation on income and revenues, of course, but there will be a variety of types of documentation, and then, of course, ways to share that documentation. So we're thinking through that as we're doing the design. And we plan to have a dedicated team that is trained to provide application support over the phone. And that team will be answering inquiries and then assisting callers who are submitting materials themselves, and then also available to submit applications on behalf of callers. So if someone doesn't have the resources but has a phone, they'll be able to apply for this program as well through our call center. And that application team will include both PED staff and redeployed library staff. I'm getting close to the end of my remarks here, so just hang in there with me here. Just a few more logistics I want to be sure that we cover as this part. So for timing, our plan is for the applications to go live on April 8th, so 1 week from today, and to close on April 19th. Both the families and business will be synchronized so that we don't have people getting confused between the two. We're automating the review as we're designing the application. We're building in automated review as much as possible to speed the process. And then we plan to begin disbursement at the end of April or early May. We've talked with a number of you about how we plan to handle oversubscription to these programs, which we expect based on the universe and the number we know that we would be able to serve. So even with the robust donations, we do still expect to be oversubscribed. And so we're planning to implement a lottery process for both of the programs so that we don't end up in a situation where it's simply a race to the fastest internet. And then finally, I want to speak with some level of detail to highlight the other resources that are available to both businesses and families and to nonprofits. The Bridge Fund is created with the objective of moving quickly to respond to the urgent need that low-income families and vulnerable small businesses are feeling, and creating a bridge of support to fill some gaps that we know are there before other resources are available, and also when other resources just simply aren't enough. We know that this Bridge Fund will not meet all of the needs, but we've designed the program to balance serving as many as we possibly can with a meaningful amount and complementing the other resources. So a few resources that are coming online for both families and businesses from the Federal CARES Act. I noted earlier that there will be a $1,200 grant coming for all singles. That'll be $2,400 for married couples, and then plus $500 per child for families, and that's for families with incomes of up to $75,000 for singletons and up to $150,000 for married couples. There's also a number of unemployment insurance provisions in the CARES Act that are really important. The benefit period is going to be extended another 13 weeks. The state benefit will be increased by the feds topping that up by up to $600 a week. The waiting period that is standard for unemployment insurance benefits will be waived. And this is really significant, that there will be expanded coverage to self-employed workers and gig workers, which are typically excluded from unemployment insurance programs. For our youth, there will also be student loan payment relief as part of the CARES program, the CARES Act, and that will suspend payments due and also interest for most federal student loans through September 30th. And then for businesses, there's a new Paycheck Protection Program that provides forgivable loans for businesses and nonprofits that maintain employees on their payroll for at least 8 weeks. That program will actually be available starting this Friday and through existing SBA lenders. So we have a number of those in St. Paul. Also for businesses that have existing SBA loans, the CARE Act will forgive debt payments, so principal and interest debt payments that are due on all existing SBA loans for the next 6 months. And then there's been in the media quite a bit of attention to the SBA economic injury disaster loans. Those were rolled out a couple weeks ago, I think now maybe a week ago. They're up to $2 million, 30 years, available for both nonprofits and businesses at low interest rates. And significantly with the CARES Act, those will now come with an immediate grant component of up to $10,000. And that happens at the point of application. And even if the application ultimately is denied by the SBA, the grant portion will not be required to be forgiven. So we're working right now, and I'll ask all of you guys to work right now to get the word out broadly to all of our businesses about that. Everyone should be applying for that program. And the SBA has just recently streamlined their program to be, they called it more of a TurboTax kind of model, so very user-friendly, quick, streamlined, and easy application process now. And then at the state level, there are deed emergency loans that have been available that were launched on Monday. Those are the community lending partners that are managing those, such as NDC and MCCD. AEDS is a community lending partner, as is ADA and several others that serve St. Paul businesses. Those loans are from $2,500 to $35,000. And then DEED has just rolled out a new loan guarantee program for larger dollar figures for working capital. And those loans are up to $200,000, and those are available through the community SBA lenders. So staff in PED and in OFE are familiarizing ourselves with these resources so that we are able to provide information and guidance to families and all businesses, regardless of size and nonprofits. And we'll work to train in the language line staff and our libraries team that are redeployed to ensure that we have really strong capacity to provide that assistance. We're also drawing on the expertise and capacity of East Team partners in this work, including Ramsey County, the St. Paul Chamber, the Downtown Alliance. They'll all be an important part of getting the word out and assisting businesses to ensure that they are accessing all of the resources available, as will our business technical assistance providers like AEDS, ADA, LEDC, and then of course housing advocates as well. So I got to the actions requested today. So the actions today are budget actions to redeploy funds that were budgeted in 2020. That were budgeted to other business assistance programs, including the Job Opportunity Fund and Strategic Investment Fund and the Neighborhood Parking Program, to allocate $1 million of budgeted dollars from the Housing Trust Fund, and then approval of the program guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Guild. Kind of what I was thinking for order here is I know I have one technical amendment. It was added late, so if you have your agenda open, maybe refresh it. It's called Tolbert Amendment, and I know Commissioner Naker has a couple amendments as well. But I thought before we get to those, if there's any questions on the staff report, we can have those questions now. Then we can take the amendments, and then after that we can have discussion, comments, and a vote. So are there any questions? It looks like Commissioner Naker has a question.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Director Guild. It was a robust staff report, but I think it is critical that we hear all these details. This is really, really important work, and kudos to your staff on all that they've done to get us to this point. Two questions. One, I just think it's important to clarify, and I'd love your confirmation of this, that the dollars that we are allocating to the Business Bridge Fund are already allocated in our budget to business assistance this year, and that the dollars that are going towards the family fund are coming from the Housing Trust Fund, just that we're not using business dollars for families and vice versa. That's one question or clarification I think it's important to state. And then the other question is just given the breadth and depth of the resources that are coming online all the time, which is wonderful to see, Does the city have a point person or point team set up that we can be telling business owners, call here and get navigated through all of this crazy? Because I think it's really important, especially for businesses that don't qualify for our program, and families, that they have a point of contact. My inbox is just overwhelmed with newsletters and links and emails, and it's frankly, I think, less helpful than more. So would love your input on that.
Director Gill. I think you're on mute, Director Gill. So maybe start again.
Yes, starting again. I was obediently muting myself. So Chair Tolbert and Commissioner Naker, those are great questions. The dollars, I can in fact confirm that the dollars for the business bridge are already budgeted, 2020 dollars that were budgeted to other business assistance programs, and we're recommending that these be redeployed to the bridge fund. And that the dollars that we're recommending be allocated to the families grants are dollars that were budgeted in 2020 to the Housing Trust Fund. And you'll recall that for the Housing Trust Fund program allocations, we've been coming back to the HRA board to make those program allocations. So this is consistent with those. And Kayla Shuckman, Housing Director Kayla Shuckman, is also, I believe, available if you have any further questions about Housing Trust Fund that we can cover later. To your question about a single point of contact, that's something that we're working to get quickly set up. So right now we're directing calls to our main PED business line, which is being staffed by all of our office assistants who have talking points about the bridge fund and can answer the high level inquiries and then can pass along questions with more detail. So that number is 651-266-6565. And that's what we have posted on the Bridge Fund website already. We are working, we're evaluating what line is going to be the most appropriate moving forward with all of the different needs that we have. And we'll have probably something new or new direction set up soon. But for now, we have the capacity to handle inquiries on that general line. And then we also do have 2 emails set up. One is business grant at stpaul.gov. And the other is, I think it's resident grant at stpaul.gov. So that would be another place that people could just send an email and make sure that we're tracking their inquiries and their interest. And the team that is managing the Bridge Fund is working very, very closely with their colleagues who aren't down the hall anymore, but are very accessible digitally, who are tracking the federal and state resources closely.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Naker, did you have any follow-up questions? No. Okay. I have Ms. Yang and then Ms. Prince. Commissioner Yang?
Thank you. Director Guild, I just have a quick question for you. I know that for the St. Paul Bridge Fund for Families, one of the requirements is to have a gross household income at or below 40% of the area median income. Is there an easy way for people who are interested in applying to be able to go to a link somewhere to figure out if they actually meet this requirement here? And I'm thinking specifically about like families who have, maybe like a larger a number of like children in their household, like 6, 7, maybe even higher than that as well. Sometimes I feel like there's not really a clear line around this.
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Yang, I'm going to have Housing Director Kayla Shuckman answer that question. It's a great question.
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Yang, we will be publishing
Ms. Shuckman, will you just, because will you just say your name for the record, just so we have it out there? Thank you.
Kayla Shuckman, Housing Director with PED. We will be publishing the household gross income limit by household size. We have calculations on that up to household sizes of 8, and we've proposed a number to adjust that even higher. So we will publish that so that families can clearly see what that looks like for larger families as well as for smaller families.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I wanted to bring that up specifically because I know that, typically like when we are looking at our immigrant refugee families, they tend to come from larger families as well. Like I know family members and friends who come from households where there's 10, 14 kids in their family. And so something that's, pretty norm to me might be something that's not as normal to other folks. So wanted to just really uplift that.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Prince?
And thanks, Ms. Guild, for your great presentation. And I know throughout this process that I have really peppered you and your staff with a lot of urgent questions. And considering how hard you've all worked over the last week to put this together, I can't thank you enough for the attention that I got to my questions. So thank you for that. I want to clarify something, and I'm not sure if you probably said this, and I was taking notes and I may have missed it, but are the funds going to pay rent? Are they going to the landlord as they do with the Families First program, or will the funds go to the family?
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Prince. I'll also have Housing Director Kayla Schuckman answer that question. She can be more eloquent.
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Prince, we are planning for the funds to be dispersed directly to families. That's our current thinking. There would be just some additional complexity towards getting those funds out directly to landlords or lenders that would likely add some processing time to release of the funds. So that is our current thinking.
Okay. I bring that up because there was an article in today's paper speaking to the hardship that landlords are going to be facing going through these eviction moratoriums. And what I worry about in terms of our long-term housing preservation efforts is that some of our smaller landlords just will not be able to survive this crisis. I think we have to be really mindful of how we look at that issue going forward. I know I heard from the Community Stabilization Program that they would like us to be talking to the governor and the state about talking to the banks to not foreclose on our rental property owners during this crisis. But the other thing I'll bring up, because it's a big concern of mine, is I think this is a really important program, and I'm proud that we are looking at supporting families in this way. But the Housing Trust Fund is a really valuable pool of money for the purpose of building permanent, deeply affordable housing. And I feel like while so many things are going to be the COVID crisis is going to derail a lot of ongoing activity. It doesn't seem to me that it would have to derail the work that we're doing with developers to get projects ready to get into the ground. And I know how much $1 million, $1 million can be the gap for a project to be affordable or not. So I just, I want to state that from a funding standpoint, that this is harder for me than the business side of the program, because the business side of the program is intended to help business. And this is money that, to a great extent, is really meant to be getting to that permanent construction of deeply affordable housing. So the only thing I want you to answer here is, can you tell me that we will be continuing our efforts with our housing staff
to be getting projects lined up so that they can be developed as soon as possible, whether or not that requires the crisis to be behind us or not.
Director Guild?
Or Ms. Schuchman, it may be a housing, it's a question about our housing development work. Is this going to put that off so that we're not moving ahead on some of these projects that are getting close to be able to be approved?
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Prince, we do not anticipate this to cause delays in projects that we are moving towards closing. We have a large team that we're assembling, cross-departmental team, and assignments to review applications will very much be made with the goal in mind of moving forward both this critically urgent short-term assistance needed for families to maintain housing stability, but also for us to continue to invest in housing supply, which is really key to solving the housing shortage long-term. And our housing strategy for the Housing Trust Fund very much has recognized the need for both strategies. Very much appreciate that question. I also want to speak to a couple of things that we have in the works in St. Paul to assist smaller landlords. We last year launched a 4D property tax incentive program for small landlords. We were really excited about the response to that program from our small landlords and the commitments that they were willing to make. So we enrolled over 400 landlords last year into that program. So they will start seeing a property tax reduction for this current year. We also are currently processing an additional 700 units that will be added to the 4D program, though the impact of that will not be immediate. And lastly, we are working on a deferral of loan payments under our rental rehab loan program. So we very much have that same concern in mind. We also are aware of some proposals at the state level that would potentially provide some additional rent assistance that would support landlords. And we don't know what the construction or financial markets will mean for our housing development, but we do not expect the bridge fund to detract from city staff efforts on those projects.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Great. Thank you very much. I know Commissioner Tao has some questions if you want to unmute.
Thank you.
Commissioner Tao, I think we're having some problems hearing you. At least I am. I don't know if everybody else is too.
Check.
It's breaking.
Yeah, it's breaking up.
How about that?
Now I think it's good.
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay.
Looks like we lost
Director
you
Gill
again.
and your entire staff.
Commissioner Tao, we can't hear you. Nope.
Check. Hello?
Yep, now we can hear you.
Okay.
I think we're having some problems, Commissioner Tao. I don't know what.
I'm still on dial-up.
Okay.
I'm still on dial-up modem.
All right, now we can hear you. You just had to tell the dial-up to start working, I guess.
Okay. I'll put my.
It's not working. I don't know if you want to sign out and sign back on, Di. Maybe we'll just pause for a moment. Does anyone else have questions while Commissioner Tao is re-signing on?
Okay, how's that?
Now we can hear you.
Check, check.
Yeah, you're good to go. The video's not on, but we can hear your voice.
All right. Chair Director Gill.
Yeah, it's not working. Is everybody else not hearing him?
Can't hear.
Could Commissioner Tao maybe call in just using a phone?
Yeah. Why don't you hang up and call from your, is there a number to call in?
Yeah.
It would be invite.
Say that again, Commissioner Brennan.
The phone number is on the Outlook invitation.
Okay. Okay.
Commissioner Tober, I have a question that I can ask while we're waiting then.
Commissioner Yang, thank you.
Thank you. Director Guild, excuse me, let me turn on my video real quick. Director Guild, I have a question for you. This is not too related to like the requirements, but more so about the part where you are going to be sending out checks. And I just wanted to flag this because I know that, whatever decision we decide on as a council, really you all are going to be hitting the ground running after this. So I wanted to make sure I communicated this. So I've had conversations with people who are who obviously live in our city, but are out of the state, like either they're stuck somewhere else or they're busy caring for someone who is far away from where they actually are residing right now. So their their property basically. And I know that something that we want to achieve is basically making sure people are getting their checks as soon as possible. And I feel like anything that we can do really to cut down the delay in the process of trying to get checks into people's hands, especially if they are not in their house right now, like physically there, that would be really great. And so I was wondering, do you all have an option to send checks to an address that isn't the current like residential property right now that the person is living in? This is the more logistical stuff, and I understand that. We just wanted to share about it.
Director Guild.
My apologies. The mute thing again. Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Yang, that's a great question. It's one that maybe our team has thought of already, but hasn't come to my attention. We are looking at a number of different options for getting dollars to folks. So that would include potentially ACH payments into bank accounts. We're looking at debit cards as an option, preloaded debit cards, which we use already for a number of our Right Track interns, and then also paper checks as an option. It's something to keep in mind as we're devising the application. So it's a timely inquiry that we'll want to figure out, how we can accommodate that so that we don't have dollars sent to an address where no one is able to receive them. There could also be some good options that we could prompt for applicants for them to forward mail. So the post office will do some mail forwarding, but we'll need to look into that further. So a lot of logistics, but you're absolutely right that we're going to be hitting the ground running on all of those logistics immediately. So thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Tao.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, yes. Success.
Is this better?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Tober. And again, Director Gill, thank you for your team and the other departments for putting this together. I was just follow-up questions, some clarity about the funds that are going to the family. If it's going directly to the family, if they ended up not using it for rent, is that is there is there liability on that, and or are we when we are communicating? When we're communicating with the family, are we also communicating with the landlord so that there's, this fund is being used? So I just need some clarity on that.
Director Gill.
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Tao, I'll have Housing Director Schuckman address that question as well.
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Tao, we are currently planning that the payments go directly to the family, while the amount of the benefit has been sized to assist families with approximately a month of housing costs. We are not planning to ask for any sort of verification or documentation from the landlord. We simply don't have the capacity to do that for 1,000 families, and we also want to build this program with really the principle that families will have a variety of needs and a variety of expenses in their lives, and that assistance will be used by families with sort of their own expertise about their families in mind. But we do expect that the families that are the target for this population are experiencing significant housing issues right now, and that while there's a moratorium on evictions, it is time limited, and that does not mean that the rent is not due. The rent is due, and at the end of the moratorium, we don't want families to be in crisis.
Okay, so then my follow-up would be that, so if it's from the housing fund, does it mean that it has to be directed towards housing purpose, like rent, and you say that? Or if it's not going to be used for, or may not be used for rent, then wouldn't it make more sense to, I guess, will there be any liability issue on our part with that? Or do we need to craft the language that could be used for anything? So those are some thoughts.
Great, thank you. Anything
I'll
you
just
want to add, Director Gill? All right.
Yeah, so we have shaped this program, Chair Tolbert and Commissioner Tao, we have shaped this program very intentionally to be sized to rent or mortgage payments, but not absolutely tied to any expense. So we know that low-income families know how to prioritize, and we expect them to prioritize their most urgent needs, and want to be flexible enough to allow them to do so.
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioner Tao, do you have any further questions?
I don't know, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. So we will do some amendments now. Mine is just a cleanup amendment, so maybe we can do that first. And like I said, it's on the agenda as an attachment, Tolbert amendment. It cleans up and puts into the final resolution what is in the staff report, but wasn't in the resolution. I can just read it really. It's number 3, and it just does the allocation of the money for the business program. So it specifies that, and it's the same exact that was in the board report. So we will start by that, and I believe we have to do all by roll call. So maybe I could have a motion from Commissioner Brenmoen, and read the roll, please.
Tao,
Aye.
Yang, Commissioner Yang.
Hey, I'm here. Can we pause a bit? I'm actually trying to find it on my register right now.
Yep, I can,
and
I'm sorry. I can read it very quickly too. It says the HRA Board of Commissioners hereby approves allocating $3 million of housing and redevelopment business program resources, including $623,854 of business assistance, $118,256 of pre-development, $408,602 of strategic investment fund (SIF), $291,472 of job opportunity fund, and $857,816 of neighborhood parking for the St. Paul Bridge Fund. And that's the amendment. Commissioner Tao, would you mind muting your phone?
My phone's on mute.
I don't think, maybe it is not.
Doesn't sound like it.
It sounds like you're having a lot more fun than us, too. All right, we'll keep going. So that was the totality of the amendment, and we could have any discussion if there's any questions on that. Basically, it just puts in the resolved what was part of the whereas and was part of the board report. Any questions or discussion? All right, we'll continue that motion from Commissioner Brenmoen, and just let's do the roll from the beginning again.
Okay, Tao.
Aye.
Yang.
Aye.
Brenmoen.
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Naker.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Chair Tolbert.
Yes.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The amendment is approved.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner Naker, I know you have a couple amendments.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Tolbert. And my understanding is that you would prefer to do them one at a time, and even though they're combined in one line in the Naker amendment document?
Yeah, I think that makes more sense because it's two separate issues, and we'll see how people feel on each of those. So.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So I'll speak about, I'll take them one at a time. But before I do that, I just want to say overall, again, thanks to the team. I'm really supportive of this proposal, and I'm especially glad that we're doing it so quickly and so well. I also appreciate having gotten the chance to have a close look at the guidelines over the last week or so and really dive into them before we vote in approval today. And I want to thank the team for the fine tuning that has clearly taken place, some of which Director Guild referred to, that has already tweaked some of the guidelines as we've gotten feedback and as we've thought through the program more. I think these details really matter when we're designing a program like this, especially when we're using so many of our hard-earned dollars to make sure that we're doing this right. So I appreciate the fine tuning, and the two amendments that I want to propose are both in that same spirit of fine tuning. And they're both to the business bridge fund side. I just want to make sure that we are, that the details are exactly right so that we can really achieve this fund's goals of supporting our small businesses through this. And also that we're making it just as easy as possible and avoiding any possible trip falls for businesses. I think the last thing our small businesses need right now is to be tripped up by red tape. So trying to get rid of any eligibility criteria that just don't seem to be achieving our purpose. So with that, the First Amendment is just to take out the number of employees, maximum of 20. My understanding from my conversations with staff is that that was used as sort of an additional proxy for small business. And I believe the $2 million revenue cap is sufficient. If you're making less than $2 million a year, you're a really, really small business. And if you happen to also then have 21 employees or 30 employees, I say more power to you for providing more jobs with that revenue cap. I certainly wouldn't want us to be disqualifying businesses that are providing more jobs rather than fewer. If anything, I think this fund will have the greatest impact if it can be helping small businesses that have a lot of employees. So hence, the proposal to eliminate the 20 employee cap.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Aker. And I'll say I think that's a good amendment, which I support. Maybe Director Guild, I think it would be helpful if you would talk about the thought process. I know you did a little bit in your staff presentation of trying to get that exact small business and the 20, as well as what you contemplated on the 2 million gross revenue versus other numbers. And
Chair Tolbert, sure, glad to. So the 20 employees is a very standard ballpark number that's used in a number of different programs, both city and state level. But there are variations in, how different entities define small. The SBA, for example, has a small definition of 250, which means something in some sectors and isn't particularly applicable for the type of businesses that we are seeking to target for the Bridge Fund. So I think that that if we were to keep the 20 or fewer employees, that would be sound and aligned with other programs. But I think that it also will not have a material effect to the detriment of the program to omit that as a requirement, provided that we do keep the other eligibility requirements, particularly the gross revenues requirement in place.
Great. Thank you very much. I have Commissioner Nelson, or Commissioner Jalali. I'm sorry, it says Nelson on the screen. And then Commissioner Prince.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Director Guild. I think that you maybe spoke a little bit to my question, but just to draw it out at the end of your remarks there, you said that making this change would not necessarily significantly impact how many businesses this is available to. And I'd like to just get a better sense of that, because I think that a sort of global challenge that we're all thinking about with this fund is that we want to both be inclusive in our requirements or any changes to them, but also if you are expanding it to more people, you are functionally making the pool more competitive for what my understanding is the businesses this fund is hoping to really reach, which are small businesses that don't necessarily have the capacity, the people power, or the, I don't love using the word sophistication, but there is a lot of sort of like unwritten know-how about how to navigate all these onerous loans programs, and we don't want to like actually make it tougher on them if this is the one resource, the Bridge Fund, that they could get, but now they're sort of being muscled out potentially by other people. And so I would be supportive of this amendment if I felt that this would not like throw open the floodgates for a whole new group of businesses, but that it is actually going to meet what I believe the intention is, as Commissioner Naker said, which is just a little bit of cleanup to not push a few folks out who might be 1 or 2 employees over the line. But it would help me a lot if you could clarify. Do you feel that's the case, or do you feel like this potentially makes the pool a lot bigger?
Director Gill.
Chair Tolbert and Commissioner Jalali, I have to say that our team has done the careful analysis work to assess what we think the size is with the criteria that we had laid out, which does include that 20 FTEs, and we had the deed numbers on the number of businesses total and how many of those are in the sectors that we think are most impacted. We have not had the time to do that kind of analysis on new criteria that wouldn't have that sort of FTE requirement, but it's our sense and grounded in a reality of what we know about a number of different businesses in different sectors, that will not be a material shift that would significantly increase the pool.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Prince.
I think my question was, I'll just say this. We did get a letter from the St. Paul Chamber that addressed this point, and I really appreciate that we're considering this amendment, because their concern was as Ms. Naker said, related to not wanting to eliminate employees who worked for these businesses. And, if it was a larger small business, that we would be able to help more people by increasing that number in terms of number of FTEs. So I appreciate the spirit behind the amendment, and I can support it.
Great. Any Commissioner Tao, you are not on mute, but do you have a question or comment?
Oh, sir, I'm going to speak in support of this amendment because I think that because there is a cap on the revenue, it would be, just my quick thought would be that it would neutral. It would be a neutral amendment, and so I would speak in favor of it.
Great, thank you. I don't think we have anything further. If I'm missing you, speak up now.
Oops.
Okay, great. Otherwise, we will take the first NACR amendment on deleting the 20 FTE requirement. Roll call, please.
Tao,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Brenmoen,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Chair Tolbert.
Yes.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The amendment is approved.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner Naker, do you want to present your second amendment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Tolbert. Thank you to my colleagues. So the Second Amendment, again, trying to just make sure that we are reaching as many of these small businesses that are vulnerable as possible right now. And it has to do with the current 6-month existence requirement. We did receive a letter from the chamber, and I've spoken to other businesses about the fact that that seems a little bit arbitrary and a little bit long. I think we should ensure that businesses are not springing up right now just to take advantage of this program, but I don't see a reason why we should be discriminating against businesses that were already sort of existing establishments in the city, whether it had been a few months or 6 months or 20 years. I think the point is we are trying to help businesses that were in operation before the emergency orders were declared. I will admit that 3 months is also a bit arbitrary, and would, am open to shorter amounts than that if people feel like that's better. But it was an attempt to get us closer to folks that had opened this year, and frankly, those businesses that had opened closer to the emergency orders and the shutdowns are probably our most fragile businesses right now. And so perhaps the ones that are no less committed to St. Paul for happening to have their open date be this year, but certainly the ones that are in need of our support.
Great, thank you very much. Director Gill, could you give us a little bit of background on the 6-month thought process?
Chair Tolbert, absolutely. So with that thought process, we actually started with a longer period of time, partly thinking that it would be demonstrating a commitment, and that it would be more straightforward to assess whether a business was a going concern despite the COVID crisis, and simply to administratively to assess their revenues for the purposes of eligibility. We were also thinking about a longer period of time at a point early in the program development where we were trying to figure out how we could size different levels of grant based on different levels of impact that we ended up deciding not to recommend moving forward with because of the administrative challenges with that. So we started with a year. And then as we talked through it further, we decided to pare that back because a year did feel like too long. And I think that we're open to a shorter period of time. And I think that Commissioner Naker made a compelling case for that.
Commissioner Brenmoen.
I was going to say so moved.
Oh, you're making a motion. All right. Does anyone want to speak on it, or?
Councilmember Chair Tolbert.
Commissioner Tao. Yeah, Commissioner Tao.
Chair Tolbert and Councilmember Necker, I'd like to do a friendly amendment to that, and to that point that we should try to reach as many businesses as possible. Because 3 or 6 months, I feel that is also arbitrary, and so my friendly amendment would be that any business that was open prior to the Governor Walz's executive order 20-04 on March 17, 2020.
Chair Tolbert.
Commissioner Naker, is that a friendly amendment or?
As I said earlier, I am open to shorter timeframes. I want to make sure that one of those two timeframes passes. And so if my colleagues I'd love to hear my colleagues' thoughts. I don't want to replace the 3 months with something else if that's not going to be successful, but I certainly would support it.
Okay. It looks like Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah. So I'm not sure procedurally, since now there's another amendment. I'm leaning to actually opposing. I think I wanted to speak to the 3-month issue, and I have a question about it. So do I get to ask my question, or do we have to deal with the friendly amendment first?
I am not sure procedurally if it was accepted. I can tell you I was struggling to get to 3 months, but I was willing to vote for it. I don't think we want to go any less than that. That's my personal belief. I think 6 months makes a lot more sense, particularly because my understanding is we are basing the gross revenue of $2 million based on, a projection for the annual year. And if you're looking at 3 months, you at least have, part of the year that you can put over. 6 months makes it a little bit easier, but a couple of days, I think that would make it very staff intensive and very difficult to allocate to that $2 million gross revenue. Maybe Director Guild could speak briefly on that, and then Commissioner Naker could decide if that's a friendly amendment or not. And I think I have a lot of people who want to talk.
Chair Tolbert, I'll say a few things, and then I'll also ask Andy Hessness if he would share his thoughts as well. So one additional challenge of shorter periods of time is in fact just administratively validating that the business is established and a going concern. One of the things that we are incorporating into the application form is that the business be registered with the Secretary of State, but that's an awfully low bar. And there are all kinds of businesses that are registered with the Secretary of State that don't necessarily have a retail presence and haven't made that kind of commitment. So there are some logistics questions that I would have with going with a shorter period of time, but there may be some other things that Mr. Hessness would have to share that I think would be important for the commission to hear. Andy, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Andy, Mr. Hessness, would you please just identify yourself for the record before you begin speaking?
Yeah, this is Andrew Hessness, Principal Project Manager in the Planning and Economic Development Department. Chair Tolbert, Commissioners, to the question of period of time for the business to be established, I think probably the most challenging point for us would be that assessment of what annual revenues would be for a business open a shorter period of time, just due to the cyclical nature of business. Particular windows of time do an okay job, but don't necessarily well extrapolate to a full year of expenses and revenue. That said, I think we can make this work at 3 months. I think staff would probably recommend against going shorter than that.
Great. It looks like Commissioner Jalali. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I think based on what we just heard and the possible implications and the work that's already gone in this, I am going to oppose. I simply feel at this point, I'm worried that we are undoing a lot of hard work that has been done without really fully knowing what it would mean. So I appreciate the spirit of the friendly amendment, but I think that pushing from 6 to 3 was already something I had questions about and actually still want to make sure I understand. So for sake of moving through the friendly amendment process, I'm going to vote no.
Okay. Commissioner Naker?
Thank you. I think given the discussion so far, I'm not going to accept that as a friendly amendment. If Commissioner Tao wants to propose it separately for a vote, that's fine. But I think I'd like to keep the motion on the table to be the 3 months.
Okay, so we have a discussion on Commissioner Naker's amendment. Looks like we have Commissioner Yang, and then Commissioner Prince, and then Commissioner Jalali. So, Commissioner Yang.
Thanks, Chair Tolbert. So I just have a question for the staff because I understand that you all have been dedicating a lot of time to this, and the things that you mentioned at the very beginning was trying to find ways to complement the other grants that are available, like through the state, feds, and everything. And so with I definitely feel like there's been a lot, that's been shifting from the first proposal or recommendation that was brought to us in front of the staff. So I have a lot to process on, but I'm just trying to figure out, like, with the change here, how does that fit into this goal that you had from the very beginning then?
Well, Director Guild.
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Yang, I don't know that changing the time frame for the business to have been in operations necessarily impacts the other resources available factor. One thing that I did want to add to this conversation is that we are expecting these dollars to be oversubscribed. So we definitely will not be able to meet all of the needs. And if there's a further reduction in the amount of time that a business has been in operations, we could have a situation where, in a lottery situation, a business that's been established and operating in St. Paul for 3 years or for 10 years, who is, vulnerable and struggling, might not get selected for a grant, whereas a business that maybe just opened, in February would be. So just put that in your minds as well. Andy, did you have other things that you would add related to the intersection with other resources?
Yeah, I don't have all the program criteria in front of me. I'm fairly certain that most of the other programs are going to require businesses to be open a longer period of time, even than the 6-month window. So I think that speaks somewhat to what we're trying to do, is fill gaps of where this program can support businesses that aren't being supported by other programs. So I think that's in the spirit of what we've been trying to do with the program. The other changes we've discussed, I agree with Director Gill, don't materially impact what we're trying to accomplish with the program. We're still focusing on small business. We're still able to really accomplish the primary goals and focus on speed.
Great, thank you. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Yang? Okay, great. Commissioner Prince and then Commissioner Jalali.
Yeah, I do want to say that the letter from the chamber, they requested that we change the 6 months to startups this year, that as opposed to 3 months, and more to Councilmember Tao's point. I think being able to project what their revenue would be isn't the question so much, because if it's businesses under 2 million in gross revenues, then they would qualify on that basis. I think the question becomes for a startup business that the hardship that they face is that they've made a huge investment to open. I mean, presumably they've made some kind of a significant investment to start their business, and that is what is being lost by this. I mean, I actually happen to know of a restaurant that opened the day before the restaurants had to close. So I think if we talk about it, it's too hard to project what their earnings are. Well, every restaurant this year is not going to, like, if they were at 2 million gross receipts, they're not going to be this year. So I can definitely appreciate the argument that Councilmember Tao is raising here, and I think I would support that amendment. It doesn't seem that the votes are there, but if Councilmember Tao wanted to move it, I think I would be inclined to include startups in that category if they had actually started up, because they are facing a tremendous hardship where they may well not survive because of the investment that they've made and having no opportunity to be in business. Anyway, I'll just put that out there.
Commissioner Jalali?
So my question is about how we would enforce or, like implement this as part of our review. And in general, we're already without the amendment looking at the requirement of folks being in business for 6 months. So how do you measure like the open date or the start date? Like what is the back end of that, and how would that change, or would it present new challenges if we were going to go to 3? And I'm sorry if that's already been said, but a lot is happening, so I just want to make sure I extra understand. Thank you.
Was that a question for me, Ms. Jalali?
I'm sorry, it was
of staff. That was a question of staff.
Sorry about that, yes.
Chair Tolbert, Commissioner Jalali, I'll have Mr. Hessness respond to that.
Thanks, Director Guild, Chair Tolbert, Commissioners. The opening date is going to be a piece, particularly as we set a window that's small, that I think will be a little bit challenging to identify. One of the questions we've included in our draft application is some indication of sort of showing the physical location that a business would be located in. There's some level of self-reporting here, particularly if we don't have any established financials to look to show any track record for the business. So, I think we get into a piece. We are having some elements of our application where the business owner is attesting to, so we probably would have to make sure that this component would be included as we're looking now at a shorter time window, just so we have a good sense of when that business did open, so we can have that as a confirmation part of our materials.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying, I'm not hearing that there's any kind of database we can look to for when they have an official live date, that they're self-reporting, that they're explaining, and that, it just really strikes me that we're really reliant on the same strategies, whether it's 3 or 6 months, and I'm worried about changing the requirement that actually creates more people applying, which is something that we've already done a little bit, and in an already limited fund, and then having to sort through even more unclear information. So I don't know that I could support this amendment, even though I understand the spirit behind it, but I guess I'm just unsure about how we could minimize the impacts on staff when they're already trying to move money out the door. So I guess that's my reaction based on what you just shared.
Chair Tolbert, if I could, our Economic Development Director, Martin Schiekel, has raised his hand digitally to me, and I'd like to call on him if we can to speak to this as well.
Thank you, Director Guild. This is Martin Schiekel, Economic Development Director at PED. I just wanted to speak a little bit to the administration of this program, and to echo something Director Guild said at the beginning of all of this, that all of the work that's already gone into thinking through the nitty-gritty, weedy details of trying to do a program this large and to get the money out the door as quickly as we're trying to do, because I think that's one of the guidelines we're following, is the sooner we can get help to the businesses, the better. We're expecting probably well over 500 applications to come in. And on the question of eligibility, each one of those will have to be evaluated. and we evaluate that now solely on the question of gross income. And so the smaller the window of a business being open, the harder it's going to be for our staff to do that. It'll likely require perhaps some back and forth with the business, and I think that's going to slow down the process. I personally, was not in favor of going from 6 months to 3 months. I think we can make it work. Absolutely would be, I think, opposed to anything shorter than that. We have to sometimes make trade-offs here in order to be effective and efficient in how we administer this, and this is already going to take an incredible amount of staff time. So I would just urge folks to consider, what goes into doing this, and think about that as you shorten the window of time for the applicants. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I know Commissioner Naker has a comment, and then maybe we can get to a vote on this amendment.
Yeah,
I'm sooner than later. Yeah,
definitely ready to call the question soon here. But I just wanted to chime in and say that I appreciate this conversation, and again that we're taking these details so seriously. I don't agree with Councilmember Jalali's point, Commissioner Jalali's point earlier about. I understand the concern about opening up the pool to more potential applicants and making it more competitive, but I think our primary concern should be just making sure that our criteria make sense and are the right ones. And if that means more businesses get to apply and it becomes more competitive, I think that's okay. But my main concern is to make sure that we are getting the guidelines right and opening it to the businesses that should be eligible to apply for it. And also, I would just say I don't know how many more businesses have applied in the last 3 months versus the last 6 months, or how many businesses have opened in that time. But I would imagine it's not a dramatically greater number than in 6 months. So.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Jalali.
Sure.
Oh, Commissioner Jalali, we'll come to you.
No, yeah, sorry. I'm going to unmute. I'm ready to vote, so I'll hold all my comments.
Okay. Commissioner Tao.
Thank you. I second what Councilmember Necker has said, that for the last 3 months, we don't have that number of how many new businesses have come in, and we don't know how many of those are going to apply. So I think the idea that we would get more, I get that. That's something that we can say, but I don't think that we're not basing on that based on how many business we know that has opened up the last 3 months. So I think part of procedure is that if I like to move, I should be able to move my amendment first. And if you guys are against that, that's fine. Then we can vote on Councilmember Necker. That's what I.
Well, I think procedurally no, because Commissioner Brenmoen moved the amendment, and so we've been discussing the 3 months amendment. You tried to add a friendly amendment that was denied, so we have a motion on Commissioner Naker's amendment, and then if you would like to make a different amendment after that, you can make a verbal amendment unless you have one written. So are there any other comments on this? And then maybe we can go to, or someone could call the question.
Chair Tolbert, I have a quick question here.
I'm sorry, I can't tell who. Okay, Commissioner.
Yeah. So I just have a question for the staff who spoke earlier. I know that a couple of the commissioners here have talked about like the number of startup businesses that have opened up in the past 3 months. And did I hear from you that you don't have that info? If you do, I would appreciate being able to have that shared here.
Director Gill, do you want to answer that question or delegate it? I think you might be on mute.
My apologies. I do think that Mr. Husness is better suited to answer that detail.
Yes, thank you, Director Guild. We do have some information looking at filings from DEED on unemployment insurance and how many establishments are paying into the system. I will mention this is all sort of looking backwards, and the most recent data we have is from the second quarter of 2019. But in that period of time for establishments, and then we had pulled the data for establishments with 20 or fewer jobs, there actually were about, looks like about 800 new businesses that had opened in St. Paul that had been operating less than a year relative to the full pool. So it potentially is a significant number of additional businesses that's over the course of a year. So, if we're talking about a 90-day swing, it could be, up to a few hundred additional jobs. That's across all industries. So, particular to the industries we're looking at, it might be a smaller pool, but, we definitely be opening probably to an additional 100 to 200 businesses would be my really rough estimate.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I have another question as well.
Commissioner Yang.
So I know we're spending a lot of time here talking about like the length of period that a business has opened up. And I feel like we've talked about this, a couple of times, but I really just want to get to the heart of like why at the beginning when you all were coming together to craft like the proposal for this, why was it not, there's a lot on my mind right now. So I know we're the time period has now, it's like now at 3 months, but I guess I'm just curious, like what is the difference between having a proposal where we don't have a requirement at all about length of period that you've been open then compared to what we are trying to discuss right now?
Mr. Hessness, do you want to answer that?
I think the fundamental difference is really what Director Schickel was talking about is from an administration standpoint, I think there is some fundamental differences of how we'd have to collect data and administer the program. So I'd sort of defer to his comments on that.
Mr. Schickel?
This is Martin Schickel. I think he's just going back to what I had said earlier. Again, we have to administer this program. If there's just a functional need to have some data, and you can only have that data when there's a length of time that has passed. So this might be very weedy. It's not a policy. I'm not addressing it from a policy standpoint about what's fair in terms of whether a business should deserve to get. It's all about just how we can administer the program. And if it went to zero, we'd have to actually fundamentally rethink how we even. I'm not even sure we could then have any limits on gross income because we'd have no way to verify that information. So we have to have some period of time for which data can be compiled that we can look at to make determinations of eligibility. It's just a functional need of administering the program. That was my only point.
Great.
And if I could just add, so this is Kristen Guild, even the administrative capacity to evaluate whether a business exists becomes much more challenging. So our ability to cross-check, so we'll be asking businesses to attest to certain things, but our staff will be doing some cross-checking. So some of that will happen naturally with businesses that we're already familiar with, or we have a relationship with, or that are, have an online presence that we're familiar with. Those we will be able to validate and verify. Whereas the shorter period of time that a business is in operations, the harder it's going to be to even do those very, very rudimentary validations.
Great. All right. We have, do you have any further questions, Commissioner, or comments? Okay, we have Commissioner Prince and then Commissioner Naker.
And I'll be very quick. I am compelled by the testimony of staff that 3 months is the right thing. So I would no longer support an amendment for brand new startups.
Commissioner Naker.
Thank you again to all my colleagues. I appreciate the discussion and I move to call the question.
Great. Let's have a roll call.
Tao?
Aye.
Yang?
Nay.
Brenmoen? Commissioner Brenmoen?
I think you're on mute, Amy.
Aye. Aye.
Jalali?
Nay.
Naker?
Aye.
Prince?
Aye.
Chair Tolbert?
Yes.
5 in favor, 2 opposed, those being Commissioners Yang and Jalali. The amendment is approved.
Great. All right. Are there any other amendments that people have? Let's see. Who's on mute and who's?
I want to push forward my amendment.
All right. What is the actual amendment?
The language is instead of 3 months, it says. Let me bring it back up here. So, whereas eligible business will have a gross revenue of less than $2 million and has been in operation in St. Paul for instead of 4, it's going to say any business that was open prior to Governor Walz's Executive Order 20-04 on March 17, 2020.
So, all right. Any questions or comments on that?
Raising my hand, sorry. Can you hear me, Chris?
Yeah, Commissioner Jalali.
Okay, sorry, Chair Tolbert. Yeah, so this strikes me as a very, very large change that would potentially create really weird situations with businesses that have been here much longer versus very new ones. And I think the debate we just had about whether or not to adjust it from 6 to 3 encompasses the heart of what we were trying to figure out. So it's just, yeah, it feels like it's a step in the wrong direction. Based on all that, I'm going to oppose.
Great. It looks like we have Commissioner Yang.
Hi, I need the amendment to be repeated again.
Commissioner Tao, would you please repeat your amendment?
Is it? I'm sorry.
Please do.
I just need to us to take a step back. Is it physically somewhere that I can see?
I think it's a verbal amendment.
I can repeat it. It's a verbal amendment. So instead of 3 months, it's any business that was open prior to Governor Walz's Executive Order 20-4 on March 17, 2020. And the reason is because you know, as policymaker, what we do is, you know, we get to make rules. We get to decide who gets help and who don't. And I think business that are, you know, they put their heart and soul, they put collateral, they started a business, and now this happened. It's not their fault. It's the pandemic. So why aren't they, you know, in the position they are in? I think they're just as worthy as anybody to apply to see if they get help. I understand that there's more work that we have to do, but that's what government does. When there's pandemic, we have to do more work. And so if we need to get help, we get outside people to come and help us file or comb through these applications.
Great. Thank you. I saw Commissioner Jalali waving. I think that meant you had something that you'd like to say.
Yeah, and I think, you know, my respectful point that I would make is that the Bridge Fund is how we're helping, and it needs guidelines so that we can actually help people and not spread ourselves thin. And I think the function of this friendly amendment is that it would make it tremendously widely available, and not it would undermine the targeting and the kinds of things that are also built into the program design that have kept staff up through weekends and overnight at some points. And I think that the spirit of it and everything that was said about our responsibility as government right now is true, but I feel that the best way to actually help people is to move forward with the design that we have versus trying to message but not follow through. So I'm actually just reiterating my point, but I feel that the spirit of it needs to be addressed too.
Great. Commissioner Yang, did you have more? I apologize. I didn't mean to change. Okay. You are not on mute. I will also speak against this amendment. I think I wasn't easy going to the 3 month, but I thought it made some sense, and I think it would show some legitimate track record. I think we do know that the amount of money and the number of businesses that need help and will be able to apply, the number of businesses will be greater than the amount of money and grants that we have available. I think opening it up to Commissioner Tao's amendment would potentially open up to businesses that might not be as legitimate as having run a business for 3 months in the city, and so I would speak against it. And I think it would make it very difficult, as staff said, to be able to figure out the total gross revenue that a business actually is making and all that they're doing. So, any other comments? I don't see that Commissioner Tao's button is not on mute, but everybody else's is. Any other comments? If not, Ms. Moore, if you want to do the roll call on Commissioner Tao's amendment.
Tao?
Aye.
Yang?
Nay.
Brenmoen?
No.
Jalali?
No.
Naker?
No.
Prince?
No.
Chair Tolbert?
No.
1 in favor, 6 opposed, being Commissioners Yang, Brenmoen, Jalali, Naker, Prince, and Chair Tolbert. The amendment fails.
Okay, so we have before us the total proposal. My belief is the Tolbert amendment passed and the Naker amendment in its entirety has passed, so that would be included. Are there any comments on the package as a whole before, and then we can vote on it? Commissioner Jalali?
Oh, are we doing roll call? Sorry, I'll unmute.
No, we are speaking on the final, unless someone else has an amendment. I haven't heard any. We're just speaking on the total package.
I will hold my comments to get this done. I wholeheartedly support it. So I'm going to mute myself till we vote.
All right, great. We have, nope, that's this. Ms. Tierney, did you have, I see you unmuted, and I just want to make sure there's not something we should know.
No, I did unmute. Thank you for recognizing me. I just wanted to make clear that in light of the fact that Councilmember Naker's amendment has been included, there should also be an amendment to the resolveds below that says that the resolution is being adopted subject to that amendment being made to the guidelines.
Okay, great. Is there anything that I need to do, Ms. Tierney, or that we need to vote on, or is what you just said substantial to make it all correct?
I just want to make sure that that is the council's intention, and then we can fix that in the text later.
Okay. Would you like us to roll call on what you just said?
Nope. I think if everybody who's listening to me can just hear that when they vote in favor, they're voting in favor of the guidelines being amended consistent with the resolution language, that'll do it.
Okay, great. Thank you for unmuting us, or unmuting and giving us that direction. Commissioner Brenmoen, do you have comments?
No, I just getting ready to vote.
Commissioner Prince?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things. One is that I thank staff, and I'm super grateful to and I know we all are, the philanthropic and corporate partners who came forward along with the United and the Wild as kind of first financial responders to bridge the resource gap for small businesses and families. And I think that's, with all the budget constraints that we face as a city, it really has taken me a while to get here, but I think it's the confidence of our philanthropic and corporate partners that helped me get to a yes vote on this. I do remain concerned, and I hear all of us saying this, about the fact that the program can't serve all the people in need, either on the business side or the family side. What I really appreciate about the length of this discussion today is how thoughtful all of you were about that very issue. I mean, it does grieve me that while we're able to help many, many families and lots of businesses, that we aren't going to ultimately be able to help everybody in who is eligible for this assistance to get it. So I think going forward, and I think Ms. Naker brought this up, our job will be to connect people with all those resources that we keep hearing about every day. And I appreciate that Ms. Guild and her staff have been keeping us informed of those programs. And so to get our city through this, it's going to be connections with all those resources as opposed to our own budget that is going to be able to have the greatest impact for the largest number of people over the long run. So not to make this go any longer for our staff who must be just completely and totally exhausted at this point, I am ready to vote.
Great. Commissioner Tao, did you have something to say?
I'm on mute.
Okay. Commissioner Jalali, did you have something to say?
I'm getting ready to vote.
Okay. I will, I just want to say a few things. One, I do want to make sure that we, that staff from PED, from the city attorney's office, everybody that Director Guild mentioned at the start of her presentation, we truly are grateful at how hard you've worked and how quickly you've put together a very important, very complex program that can help people very quickly. So thank you all for working. I know you worked a lot of nights, a lot of weekends, and did it all virtually while that happened. And we all really appreciate your thoughtful work and look at this, as well as giving a shout out to all the private and nonprofit partners who are contributing to this effort as well. We really are grateful that the community is coming together, and I suspect we'll get even more as this program rolls around. The thing about this, I think, is important to remember is, you know, we are building this program and have built this program over the last couple of weeks while the world was changing. Staff did a fantastic job of being flexible as both the federal and state governments were responding with relief packages, and we tried to figure out how to help the families and the small businesses that might struggle to receive those state or federal assistance. And our goal was to ensure that nobody got left behind in St. Paul. And I think that we've hit that right amount. We know there is more need for the people and the families and businesses of all sizes than this package will address, both for people that qualify for it and businesses that qualify for it and for businesses that don't. But I think in partnership, we have directed at the right amount of the right people. It is a time of uncertainty and in our city for people and businesses, and I think the response at the federal level, the state level, and now our level should help that. But one of the advantages of being a city government and municipality is that we can be nimble and we can be responsive, and we really are out in the community with the people. And so I know that we'll have more things rolling out, and we'll be able to react as this world changes day to day and week to week and month to month. But I just hope our businesses and our families know that we are thinking about you. We are trying to help you as much as we possibly can. And I also want to, you know, with the business challenge, the commitment from the Mayor Carter as well as staff to ensure that the businesses who might not qualify for the grant that we will be passing today, we will help you apply for those SBA, direct you to the proper grants and loans so that you can get the help that you need as well. And I think the same is for families who might need help either through our workforce centers, directing you to the proper DHS department to get MFIP or to get other public assistance that you may need in these difficult times. We are here to help you, and I know that our entire staff would be willing to do that. But thank you very much. I think this is a great program, and I hope my colleagues support it, and then we can get money to start helping people very quickly. With that, if no one has anything else to say, Ms. Moore could take the roll call.
Tao?
Aye.
Yang?
Aye.
Renmoen?
Aye.
Jalali?
Aye.
Naker?
Aye.
Prince? Aye. Chair Tolbert.
Yes.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted as amended.
Fantastic. And that is the only item before the HRA. Is there anything else to come before the HRA? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night.
Thank you.